Welcome back to the Now What podcast. I am your host, Arian Foster. We took a little hiatus, man. I got tired of talking to people, got tired of traveling, man. So I decided to take a week off and enjoy my week. And I'm glad I did. Got that nice, just re-energized, feel good, man. But so I have before we get started, Smarty Pants Vitamins is the title host of this podcast. So if you don't know what Smarty Pants Vitamins is, go ahead and get you some. They're gummy vitamins, and they're the best on the market in my humble opinion. So we have a special guest today, man. Back on doing webcasts, man. This is always fun for me, man. But we got Dylan Curran. Dylan Curran, you made a lot of waves around probably like 2 months ago. And you had this tweet that went viral. Viral tweets are always fun because the whole world talks about the things that your thoughts. And it was interesting, man. You started out saying you want to freak yourself out. I'm going to show just how much of your information the likes of Facebook and Google store about with how much information Google and Facebook store about you without you even releasing it. So, Dylan Curran, you're a privacy consultant. And this tweet went viral. Did you expect it to go viral? I mean, it has 260,000 likes, 160. I mean, that's you're covering a lot of people right there, man. Did you expect that, or did you just decide?
No, dude, I was hungover one Saturday morning and just I was kind of bored, and I came across like another Twitter thread that was, it was like similar enough, but it was only doing like a couple of Facebook stuff. And so I just went in, got the archive, did a little bit of my own research. Took about 5 hours. Then just literally put it straight on Twitter, and I think to date it's accrued about 150 million views, unique views. So that's that's not a like trivial thing. That's viewed by like 5 or 10% of the population.
Now that's huge.
And then my Guardian article, which was literally just a thread converted into an article, I think it was like the highest viewed article of all time.
Wow.
On the Guardian, which is just insane. So no, like I didn't even think it was that surprising, you know what I mean? But that just shows how much I think people in like the tech community take for granted what we know and like the knowledge we have, and how like people just don't really know this kind of stuff. And I think it is like, whatever your opinion on it is, it's definitely important for you to know. At the very least, you should know.
100%. So what is your background? How did you come into this field? Like, so people know you not some just drunk dude on Twitter talking.
Well, I got my first computer at 12, and then I've been embedded in the community for over 11 years. I'm only 23, but I've spent a lot of that time researching, looking up things, just looking as deeply into the internet as I possibly can. So like I was a web developer for at least 5 years. So I kind of I generally knew my stuff to some degree. And I know privacy very, very well, because me and a close friend of mine used to go on the darknet all the time. And we used to try and do tests to see, like if Facebook or Google could figure out who we were. And at around 80 to 90% of the time, they always could figure out who we were. So I kind of...
Explain to me what the dark web is, because, I mean, I have an idea, but I think you explaining this lets me know that I don't think I do.
So the dark web is... It's basically all the sites that aren't indexed by, say, Google or anything like that. So you can't find it on the typical internet, and you need to use a specialized browser called Tor, Tor, in order to access the sites. And the sites have a URL. It's like a string of letters and numbers. Like I think it's 32 letters and numbers, and then it's .onion. So you need all those factors in order to access the sites. And there's some good stuff on the darknet. There's things like journalists and publications use it so people can anonymously give information. So that's where whistleblowers give their information, is on the darknet. I think there's a free press site or something like that. But most of the time people use it to get drugs, child porn, etc., hacking. It's all that kind of stuff. So it's like it's fascinating to go into those kind of sites.
I mean, is it something about like servers, or what separates the dark web from the regular web? Because all I know about is the regular web.
Well, generally, a lot of the sites on the dark web won't be indexed by Google because they're illegal. That's generally how it goes. So when you say indexed by Google, does that mean like when... I'm gonna just explain it because I'll be... So when Google indexing is basically Google taking a website and storing it in their servers and storing the URL and stuff like that. So they might store like facebook.com, and then when you search Facebook, it'll come up facebook.com and allow you to click into it. But they will not do that for .onion sites in general, and they won't do it for most of the sites on the dark web. That's why it's kind of on the dark web, is because it's illegal in every single fashion, and they are done in such a way that it makes it as difficult as possible for law enforcement to track down who is actually responsible for owning the site, and also where the servers are. Like, have you heard of the Silk Road?
I have not heard of the Silk Road.
So the Silk Road was one of the biggest it was one of the first and one of the biggest black market drug forums in the world, and it had hundreds of thousands of users, and it was essentially like you go on and you pay in Bitcoin and then someone sends you drugs, like in the post. And it took the FBI around 3 years to track down who was responsible for owning the site. And in the end, they also couldn't even prove that he owned the site. All they could prove was he was done on some sort of weird immigration thing. But it's essentially like you just cannot figure out who's on the dark web, and you can't figure out who owns the sites. And it's just a nightmare for law enforcement in general.
So it's like how they usually track us is like IP address, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where Tor comes in, is because when you use Tor, it basically distorts your IP address. So conventionally, when you access a site, you send a request from your computer to the website server, and they send the website back. But what happens with Tor is you send your request through 6 different other computers, and then at the very last one, it grabs the website, and then it goes back through the 6 different computers and brings it back to you. So it's really, 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 really difficult to track down who's doing that.
So it's like I'm totally spitballing right here, but encryption, stuff like that?
Well, Tor is not typically encrypted, but you can get sorry, just making this more complicated. But you can get...
Nah, this is interesting shit.
Yeah, well, it's good. Like, it's not encrypted per se, but it's really hard for people to figure out where you are. They can eventually find it, but it would take them a long time. And then if you use a VPN, so that's just a virtual private network that also encrypts your traffic going through Tor, and then eventually it's almost impossible to track down who's going on these sites.
Yo, this is mad interesting, and I want to circle back after we talk about the reason why you got Twitter famous, man. But so the tweet that you because it kind of has, we'll tie it in. What it has to do with is the reason why Facebook and Google stores all of this information about us. And what you found was like alarming. And I'm going to let you tell it before me because I mean, obviously you went through it. So basically you found out that Google and Facebook did exactly what?
Well, I guess what was most shocking really is to what degree they go to collect information, and also like how far back they're willing to store it. So like one of the most shocking things to people was the fact that they store your location every time you turn on your phone. So if you keep the location setting turned on your phone, they'll store your location every time you turn on, like if you flick it up to look at a notification, they log it like straight away. So that's not a small thing. Like if you're doing that, like, you know, how many times did you look at your phone in a day? 100, like 200. That means that they have time-stamped locations exactly where you are 200 times a day. So when I went into my like archive, I found that they had stored my location every single day, maybe 10 to 20 times a day for 6 years.
That's kind of sick.
So yeah, like, and people don't realize that. And look, that's, to be honest, like I consented to that. You know, like I agree to the terms and conditions. I use Google Maps, etc. That is my responsibility. But no one knows that's happening. Like you agree to the terms and conditions, then you just use Google Maps, and then suddenly you have, you know, they have a time-stamped map of everywhere you've been for 6 years, which is, you know, like,
I think that's the huge issue is the terms and conditions is kind of like, it's a lot of lawyer jargon, it's a lot of technical jargon that the average human is not going to understand. So is that kind of the trade-off for the technology that we use? Or are there, do you feel like there's some responsibility for these companies to kind of break it down to us exactly what we're consenting to?
Generally, like I do believe it's more like an individual responsibility when you're using website on the internet. But when it came to the terms and conditions of most of the big tech giants, what was really frustrating was that it was in tech law jargon. So, you know, it would be like, okay, go to Appendix A and then reference to Appendix E and then go to Appendix F, but then go to Appendix Z and go to Section 2, and it was just a load of bullshit. And it was very, very, very difficult as a normal human being to even understand what was going on. And look, we can say whether that's technically okay legally, but in terms of like ethically and morally, it's not really cool. So like legally, look, it's fine. But that's one of the good things about it. Have you heard about GPDR in the EU?
I have not.
So that's just a new set of laws that went in to crack down on all these American companies. And what they stipulate is that, look, no more bullshit terms and conditions. For instance, Facebook's terms and conditions was, if you stacked it out on paper, it was almost as tall as a person. So it was like, that's how much shit you'd have to go through in order to understand it. That would take you maybe 3 years of reading.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So GPDR says, look, none of that shit anymore. We're fine if you stipulate like unfair terms and conditions, but you have to make them legible. So now when you go to Facebook's privacy policy, for the EU at least, it's maybe, 10 minutes of reading, that's doable. Like that's, like if you're concerned about that kind of stuff, you can read it, you can understand it. I'm actually doing videos about it right now. But yeah, in general, I mean, most people aren't going to read it anyway. Even if they made it 3 sentences long, people aren't going to read it regardless. People just don't care.
I think you have a higher, I agree, people don't care, but I think you'll have a higher percentage of people if it's done in a way that's to the average everyday citizen's comprehension skill set. Because like, I've read through a couple of terms and conditions, and I reach a point where I'm like, I don't know what the fuck any of this shit means anyways. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Why do you think that there's so much hidden inside of these terms and conditions? Because like there's things that we're consenting to, like I've watched a couple of documentaries on it. I've read a couple of articles. The things that we're consenting to is things like giving all of our private information to companies, and then they turn around and sell it to other companies, ad agencies, and they turn around and advertise to us. Like, to me, that's kind of backwards as well.
Well, like, look at it this way. I mean, look how much money Google makes. That should give you a clue as to why they do these kind of terms and conditions. They want to give themselves as much freedom as possible to distort, sell, and gather information as they possibly can. Like, that's their revenue model. Google makes over 90% of its revenue from digital advertising. So, like they're going to make sure that they're okay legally to gather as much information as they can. So I don't think it doesn't require that much like dissection, to be honest. Like, it's pretty obvious. They do it so that they can give themselves as much legal freedom as possible. And when people turn around and go like, hey, that's not okay, they go, oh, but you accepted the terms and conditions.
I mean, legally, to me, it's like a loophole. It's like a little swindler's loophole. Like, of course I'm going to agree to it because I want to talk to my friends that are in Europe or whatever,
Yeah.
It's kind of like a snake oil salesman, man. But do you think that there's a line drawn, like, ethically with some of these things, with all of these things, really?
To some degree, yeah. I mean, it's what I think is happening right now is that a lot of these big tech companies have a social monopoly. So it's not that it's not a product that you can really do without in today's day and age, which is, so it might not have like a conventional monopoly, where they have like a monopoly on oil, like Standard Oil in the 1920s, and they're jacking up prices and it's destroying the economy and stuff like that. What they have is a social monopoly. So like if you want to communicate with your friends online and every single one of your friends is on Facebook except you, that's socially isolating, which is a lot more compelling than most people realize. Same with Snapchat, same with Instagram, same with Twitter. So those are only the social medias. And then with Google, like, Google is just flat out the best search engine, unfortunately, only because they've been gathering so much information for so long that it allows them to be the best search engine. Right. So you don't really have many other options in those kind of ways. But morally and ethically, I think they've kind of crossed that line over and over and over. But I blame people more than that. I think we've allowed them to do that like companies do what companies do, and they try to make as much profit as possible, and to turn around and go like, hey, you shouldn't be making so much profit. It's like, well, you don't have to use Facebook, you don't have to use Twitter, except you do.
That's what I'm saying. You kind of do. I know probably like a handful of people in my life that are off the grid, right? And my stepfather's one of them. I'm putting him on the grid right now, but he turns all his location services off. You know, he's not on any social media. He doesn't have any kind of, everything he does is real. Like even his Wi-Fi password is like this long. Like I'm like, come on, fam. Nobody's trying to hack you. He's super serious about it. He just doesn't want any kind of government influence or anybody influencing his private life, which is his right as a citizen, which is all of ours, and we're kind of conceding that we have all of these. So what are some of the things that you found in when you looked through the archival of your information from Google? Was it Google or Facebook that you looked at?
Both. So I went through both.
So what kind of stuff?
Well, Facebook wasn't really that surprising. I mean, they stored all your typical stuff. What I found, one of the weirdest things with Facebook, I'll just start off with Facebook. Like, one of the weirdest things I found with Facebook is that they stored messages I thought I deleted. So, like, I had deleted conversations before, but they kept them, which is one thing. But apart from that, I don't think they really had anything that was too surprising to people. I mean, they kept your statuses, they kept your photos, they kept your location. Well, yeah, they kept your, every single time I'd logged into Facebook or accessed Facebook in the last 10 years was stored every single time in this massive list. Absolutely huge. Since 2008 when I signed up, and they had every single time I opened up Facebook. The IP address, my location.
I mean, it's stay right there for a second. It's crazy because I kind of had the same feeling when I read your initial thread, but like not hearing it. I mean, when you kind of, and in the back of your mind, like yeah, they're probably doing that. But when you hear it and you've actually seen it, the list of every time, do you feel violated?
Well, not really.
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
I wouldn't say because I've been doing this stuff for so long. I kind of half knew. You know, I didn't realize the scope. You know, for how far back they collect the information. But I wasn't that shocked. What I think was, I think most people kind of know that that's happening subconsciously. Like everyone knows nothing in life is free. So when you use these kind of services, I think people realize that something shady is going on in the background. And even then, when because like literally like a month after Cambridge Analytica came out, you know, like 89 million Facebook's information leaked for the Trump campaign to use. Like people didn't really care, that like people weren't as outraged, it seemed to me at least, until they saw my Twitter thread. That's what it seemed to me. And a lot of people asked me, it's like, well, that just seems really self-evident and obvious. And I was like, well, maybe to you, but like I don't think people realized how much they're storing on an individual level. And when you go down through it and you just keep seeing, because that Twitter thread was like 34 tweets long, so and it was just bang bang, because I only put the most shocking stuff in. I only put the actual crazy things in. So when you just go down, it's like, oh my God, it just keeps going. And it's never ending. And they collect every single aspect of everything. And you can literally just see your personality and your history of your life laid out in front of you. It is like that. That's more crazy to think of. Like, 'cause you think when you go through life that all you have to rely on are your memories. And to see something so clearly laid out, it's almost as if someone is writing an autobiography about you every single day. And
that's what it does. It feels like somebody's watching you. That's
exactly. And
like.
Look, I try not to be too conspiracy-like and say like, oh my God, they're watching us, they're in our brains, like all this stuff. I don't think that's what's happening. Like they're using this information.
They are though.
Yeah, like to some degree, but they're all, but to some degree, yes, but they're mostly using it just to make money. Like, I don't think they're doing it to like control our lives or anything like that. I do think it's literally just all profit motivated. So I wouldn't.
So I philosophically, I'm gonna argue with you there, because if you look at how we're advertised to now, right? Advertising is proven to work, and it's efficient, and it's a cornerstone of capitalism.
Yeah, well, nudge advertising, yeah.
The what?
Nudging advertising, that's the exposure. You know, when someone, you know those stupid fucking ads where it like it shows someone driving a nice car and it's like lifestyle orientated, and they're not even saying like this car is the best. It's just showing you that it kind of gets it gets into your brain a little bit. Yeah, I see what you're saying though.
Yeah. So I mean, that kind of pushes the social narrative in our society, right? So whoever's controlling the information actually kind of controls the narrative of where society goes. I mean, you have, I don't know how much legitimacy to this whole Russian investigation there is. I'm unsure. the jury's kind of still out on that. But as far as there has been like bots that have been created to push an agenda to incite like not just to incite like erratic online behavior, right? So like when you control this information, you kind of control social narrative. So it's like they're not controlling us per se, but I mean, groupthink is the most dangerous thing in as a society. Like, and the big problems I see is as I walk through my daily life, I go to the store. I don't see a lot of conflict. There's not a lot of conflict. I see a lot of what people in the history of our country have bled and fought for, a lot of progression, a lot of things. You know, there's still some issues. But the most combative things I see is when I go online. It's a battle of ideas. And this battle of ideas is being played out on these websites. And these websites have these massive amounts of information to control this narrative. It's like who's overseeing the overseers. That's what it basically boils down to.
So you're basically talking about echo chambers to some degree. Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. Look, I do agree with you on that kind of way, especially because every single tech company is run by a really far left sort of institution in some way. Like if you look at Facebook, you know, like I don't think I'm not even going to go into political views or anything like that, but just saying like for the sake of diversity of thought, I think they had like one conservative in like 1,000 or something like that people, and they're the one, and that's the moderator, so that's the people controlling the content that appears, it disappears. And there was proof that Facebook was censoring conservative content as opposed to progressive or leftist content, which is worrying, you know, like, and I've heard people say, well, you know, they deserve to be censored, and I'm like, no, they don't. No one gets to control like who's censored. I mean, to some degree, yes. Like if there's someone on the internet like just racial real racial hatred, like really being properly bigoted, not the kind of weird terms we have now where it just encompasses anyone who disagrees with kind of the left side of the aisle. If there's real racial hatred going on or real bigotry, yes, maybe they should be banned. But what we're seeing really now is that if someone says that they disagree with using, say, like a transgender pronoun, you know, like they deserve to be banned from the internet and they're abused and all that kind of stuff. And that's just
right. And that's where it's like a it gets dicey there because it's like who gets to draw the line of what is bigotry and what is not bigotry.
Yeah, the best definition I've heard is that the people you want least to define hate are the people who are going to define hate, because no one wants to do that. Like no one really wants to. If you're smart, like you know you don't want to define it because you know that there's going to be contentious point of views on what hate is and what hate isn't. So it's only the people who are, let's say, stupid enough to actually think that they can do it are going to define the parameters for hate. I mean, there's even they're doing a thing for ageism on Facebook right now, so you can't even just say like, oh, she's an old fuck. You know, like you couldn't even say that. Like that's considered hate speech. That's hate speech per Facebook now. So yeah,
it's pretty disrespectful.
Yeah, maybe
just walk around calling people old fucks.
Yeah, you granny
I feel
fuck.
what you mean, man. And then it's a huge political divide in our country right now, like the free speech debate, right? And I've addressed it a couple of times on my podcast, but that I think is kind of a byproduct of freedom. You have people on this side and you have people on that side, and you get to talk it out. What more so I'm concerned with is the people behind the curtains that see the fight going on and are kind of nudging it along with advertisements, nudging it along with groups, nudging it along with little things like that because they have access to the information. And the people that are in the fight aren't 100% cognizant of people that are cognizant of it. Does that make sense? And that's
no, I get you.
That's what I'm more worried about because the fight is going to be the fight, and there's always going to be a battle of ideologies. That's just going to happen. What other kind of things did you see that were like, this is crazy in your archival?
They stored my incognito search history. So they stored my, you know Google Incognito, you know, and it's meant to be private. Yeah, they stored that. So that was going back maybe like 10 years. So that was when I was a teenager. And let's just say, I mean, those searches were
oh yeah,
they were a little bit disorientating at the best. I mean, they were disturbing at worst. So that was probably one of the most disturbing things. I mean, they're storing, your browsing history, search history, etc., going back to when you started your account, pretty much.
So if you have a new phone,
if it's using your Google account, yes. If it's not using your Google account, then no.
Okay.
Well, they might store. I've read through their privacy policies at least 20 times, the new ones, and it seems like they do collect information. I've said this for years, and people said I was crazy, but they do store information about you, even if you don't have an account, and they tie it to your IP address and device. So it doesn't matter if you're signed in or not; they're collecting it. So, and they say that.
So like if I go to use somebody else's computer, it goes to their name in their search history.
Pretty much, yeah. So if someone got on your phone and searched child porn, there's no way of you proving that wasn't you.
That's scary too.
Yeah, I mean that can happen. Like that's happened to people. Like there's I actually had an article called it was I can't remember what it was called. It was your phone camera and microphone are spying on you. And I went into a little bit of detail there that there are ways, if someone gets access to your computer, for instance, say they through hacking or whatever means, through a virus, whatever. We'll just take that for granted. If they have access to your computer, they can just deposit a child porn image on your computer and then change the details of it so it shows that you downloaded and viewed it a few times, like, within the last 6 months, and then call the police. Like, they could do that. Like, that possibility is definitely there.
My God.
How did I get into that from, like, the incognito?
Well, I mean, just capabilities of people being able to access the information
sorry, that's where I was going with it. Yeah, so your information does matter. Like information that's tied to you does matter, because if they can store something real about you, then they're going to store something fake about you too, and that's a scary thought. Like you should think about those kind of things. Like if your child is using your browser, you have no idea what they're going to look at, and that's tied to your name. And the U.S. government files 6,000 subpoenas a year to all these tech companies, and 90% of the time they comply, giving all of your information to the government. And if that shit's happened, then you're fucked. Like, there's no way for you to prove it wasn't you.
So is there any kind of protection that is allotted to us as citizens from major corporations, or do we just give it away with our agreeing to terms and services?
Well, you kind of have a couple of routes. Like, you can go into the privacy settings and turn them off. So you can go into like Facebook and Google's privacy settings and just turn off the different toggles to collect certain information, collect your messages, etc. etc. I don't know for sure if they'd stop collecting it after you do that, but I also have
that was my, not to mention cut you off, but that was kind of my concern, was like if you found recovered deleted Facebook text messages, what the fuck are they keeping deleted text messages for? And if I just turn off some settings, what makes me believe that they're gonna not collect that data anyway?
Well, when you delete your Facebook messages, for instance, it's not made abundantly clear, but all you're deleting it from is your account, not from their servers. Or because if you think about it this way, like when you send a Facebook message, that's going to another person. Both of you have stored the message. So it's, if you only delete it on your side, it's not going to delete it totally. But I cannot really project that they're still keeping that information after you turn off all the settings and delete it, etc. like that, because I have no idea.
If you were to make an educated guess, what would you?
I would say they totally keep it, because they're they're a profit-oriented company. They make money from this stuff, so why would they? Why would they get rid of it? It doesn't make any sense from a company point of view. It doesn't. I don't see why they would actually delete it. They might not stop showing it to you. But again, like, that's projection. I have no clue. Like, I can't, unless I have access to their servers or I'm high up in the company, I don't know at all. So I'm not gonna make that accusation. That would be completely unfounded with no evidence whatsoever.
I'll make it for you.
Thank you.
I just don't think because of how unethical they've been in the past. Number one, number two, when you see Fortune 500 companies such as Facebook and Google, they're still lobbying to protect themselves from these kind of things to Congress and people like that. So if you're lobbying for some of these things, there's no way, in my opinion, you're trying to act in good faith. I feel like you're doing it. I feel like it is for profit, but people you're selling it to, you don't have any idea what their intentions are. And when it starts getting intermingled with privacy and in our society, I think this is when it's kind of this is why it's so intriguing to me. You go down this rabbit hole of what privacy is in America now, and it's kind of scary how there really isn't any, unless you just disconnect yourself from our society, which, like you said, that can be socially isolating. So, like, where do you stand on like privacy, and when it's like, are you worried for the future of privacy?
Well, my stance on privacy really is that, I mean, we're using these services for free, ultimately, and I don't feel like we have a right to really demand that they stop collecting our information, which is their only profit model, especially when we keep consenting to these kind of things. I mean, personally, I think what's going to really solve the problem is really just going to be innovation. I think innovation is going to solve the problem. We're going to get better services that don't have to use our information to such an extent. I'm working with a company called Presearch, and like they have a search engine built off the idea that they don't collect your information, but they use like keyword advertising, and then they give some of that revenue back to you. So it's a nice innovative model that could actually work for the future, and I hope that's going to be the case. But in general, I mean, I'm actually trying to get. Ironically, I'm using the internet to try and stop people from using the internet, which is which is ironic, but it is what
Inception.
It is. Yeah. I'm writing a book at the moment called The Internet, Heaven or Hell, and it's going to be going into all the different aspects of the internet that's really kind of benefiting society on one hand, and then taking away from society on the other hand. And one of the biggest things is that social media is incredibly isolating. It's not what we think it is. It's this weird alternate reality where we think we're communicating with people, but we're really not. Like this is literally just text on a screen. Like if you're talking with someone on the internet, they're not your friend. There's no human connection. We've evolved to have eye contact and that kind of stuff, and to use mic and body language and all those kind of things, and that's how we communicate and actually connect to one another. Like I was reading a really interesting study that found around 40 years ago, the average American had 4 close friends. So they had 4 friends that they could confide in, that they could trust, etc., etc., etc. Ask for help. The average American now has 0. They have 0 close friends that they can trust, confide in, or anything like that. So the number is like 0.6 or something like that, which means, like some people might have 10, some people might have none. But overall, if you go to the average person in America, they have almost 0 close friends to confide in. And we're social animals, man. That's fucked. Like we're in the most...
I would agree, but I think, because I'm a pessimist, right? So I'm a self-proclaimed pessimist. And the reason why is because I don't believe that people are inherently smart people, right? I think individually you can find intelligent, articulate people that can sit down, have a conversation, and be rational about their ideas, whatever. But the majority of our population are emotional, and they believe whatever the click, every headline and everything, and that's why we have a lot of these issues we have today. So when I hear something like that, like they have 0 friends, I don't know the accuracy of that, but I would definitely agree to the fact that maybe back then, you said it was 60s or what you said, 60s?
Yeah, it's 40 years ago, so it was around like the 70s, early 80s.
60s, 70s. So I think back then, yeah, you probably had more, the social networks were a little tighter, but also I think there was a lot of farce in those social networks, right? Because the church was bigger. I think that when you look at things like sports is a big unifier, right? But that's becoming politicized. So I think this might have to be the backlash before we eventually come back together, because for years and years it was just an oppressive mind state, right? So it was segregation. It was people were kind of in their own pockets, and then the internet forced us to really unveil ourselves. How do you really feel about your neighbor? How you really feel? Like, I think that's what's happening right now is when people figure out how people really feel, they're disassociating themselves from other people, right? So I think you're right. We are kind of becoming not as connected, but I don't necessarily view it as a bad thing. I think it's just a backlash of of our history as humans, of being really segregatedly driven beings. Like,
true, like if we go back to the 60s and 70s, things were a lot more segregated, even just between, like blacks and whites, etc., like that. And obviously things are a lot better now in terms of like racial, in terms of like people just in the streets treating each other well. Yeah, that's probably gotten a bit better. But what my biggest concern is, like, say, like the loss of like the church institution, and I'm not really religious at all. That's like that, even no matter like what race you were, you always had that kind of local community and that sort of sense of meaning. And I feel like that's being lost on the internet. Like that's what's kind of destroying that. Now people are they're just sitting down watching YouTube videos. They're sitting down reading tweets. They're not really engaging with the world. And one of my biggest concerns with this is that we've seen an absolutely skyrocketing anxiety, depression, and suicide rate among young people. Like unbelievable. Like suicide is the biggest killer of young men in Ireland for men aged 15 to 44. The biggest killer by a large margin. And it's crazy that like the West has gone to such a stage where killing ourselves has become one of our biggest problems. Like we don't even have to worry about starvation. Like barely have to worry about homelessness. You don't barely have to worry about disease. You barely have to worry about like finding a job, like stuff like that. Like you just literally have to worry about being happy and not killing yourself.
Right.
And I do think the internet's very much detracting from that, which is why I brought up the isolation statistic, is because you would think in a world where we're so much more connected, we've actually never been more disconnected from one another. And it's just...
And I agree. And I think there's aspects of it I think we need to think deeper to. Like if you look at it macrocosmically, the internet is a fucking baby, right?
That's a fucking great word, man. Macrocosmically. I love that.
Is a baby. It's just started. We're just now scratching the surface of what this thing is, right? And so a lot of our youth not understanding that what you see on a screen necessarily isn't reality. I mean, there is an aspect of reality to it, but it isn't necessarily reality, and you don't need to judge yourself by the standards of what you see in the entire world. Things like that is kind of our fault as adults, right? Because late 20s, 30s, 40s, 50-year-old adults, we didn't understand the machine that the internet was. We didn't educate our children on, like, there should be classes about social media. There should be classes. I'm talking about young elementary school. There should be classes about the internet, understand what the internet is, because it has now been interwoven in every single aspect of our lives. There isn't an aspect of our lives where the internet isn't involved. Not one. So I think if you take into account our lack of educating our youth about the internet, it probably plays a huge role in that. Because I don't want to demonize the internet, and the reason why I don't want to demonize it, because, and it's anecdotal, but I've grown so much from the internet, right?
Oh yeah, dude, my career, my life is based on the internet.
Right. So you can attest to it as well. So I think we have to take responsibility for what it is. And I think a lot of what it is shitty people in the world, and they use the internet as a tool, and you can use a hammer to kill somebody or build a house, right? So we have to take responsibility in educating our youth about the internet. But it's an interesting point that you bring up, though, because people are depressed way more than they were.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what I'm trying to stress. So I don't want to sound too negative at the internet. Like, that's where I'm going into with the book, like Heaven or Hell, is that, like, I also go into the positive aspects, which we have, the biggest library in the world. Like, you can learn anything. Like, you can learn anything you want on the internet. Like, you can better yourself so much. Like, there's so much information and educational stuff out there for you to better yourself with. So that's one of the positive aspects. If you have like a niche talent or something you're weirdly good at, but that you wouldn't have had the environment to really breed that niche. Like, for instance, like, people make a shit ton of money for playing video games. I mean, that is fucking crazy. PewDiePie is worth like what, $10 million, $20 million?
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's insane. That's just off his personality. Like, we're able to monetize just our personalities now, like nothing else. You don't even need like you don't need to be particularly good at video games. You don't need to be you don't even like nothing. Like, you just have to have fun.
Nah, and in that aspect, I feel like it's super dangerous, right?
Yeah.
Is because I have kids now, right? So my kids come and I hearing their friends want to be when they grow up. They say YouTube star. Like, that's an actual career path now.
Yeah,
when I was growing
I
up, no fucking career path. And now, like,
Yep.
you can aspire to be there. And that shit is insane.
Man, it's like Kim Kardashian and stuff like that, where I'm like, look, she's monetized her stuff well and all that kind of stuff, and she seems like a decent enough human being, etc.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean she's a good role model. I mean, it's basically pushing, say, like, maybe this is a bad example, I might get torn over this, but I feel like it's pushing women to monetize their body as opposed to monetize their minds, which I think is happening quite a lot. And then it's the same on YouTube and stuff like that. It's basically monetizing just probably you being a douche on the internet, which then 13-year-olds I think is hilarious, and then give you like $5 a month from their parents' credit card.
No, 100%. So I mean, to that point, I don't know how much you listen to rap, right? But rap is my favorite genre of music, and I've been really sunk in this past year, right? Where because what I grew up on, what I consider quality music, I grew up on like Earth, Wind and Fire, 70s bands, things like that, right? And so, like, that's like quality music in my opinion, whether you care about instrumentation, yada, yada, yada. Well, technology has changed that to where anybody, every block and every house can put out a music project, right? You can just hit some buttons and you can record whatever. So what is separating somebody from blowing now from not blowing? It's not the quality of music, because the style out right now is just real. It's real popish. It's easy to recreate, right? It's not hard to do. So the things that's separating artists now is what they call trolling, right? And it's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah. So now, for people that don't know, there's so many artists out there who will intentionally and cognitively get in like beefs or start a bunch of drama. They'll troll people. They'll do this. They'll do that just to garner the attention. That then they say, oh, now that they have these million followers, I have a project to put out, and that project does well. Prime example is the little girl. I felt bad because she's a little girl. She don't know no, but this is the model. The girl that was on Dr. Phil, I think her name is Bad Baby or something like that. She was 14 years old. Yeah, she was 14 years old.
Yeah,
and she was on Dr. Phil talking shit to her mother, talking shit to everybody else in the crowd, and all of a sudden she started putting out music, and she had a gold record, bro. She has a gold record. That's a real thing. And you can't and I listened to one of the songs. It's not my flavor. Shout out to her. She's doing the thing. But it's like, that is the blueprint for our youth, is attention seeking rather than quality building. And I don't see a remedy for that because it works so well. I really thought about this.
Well, I mean, if you look at, we'll even just take rap as the example, and if you look at, like, regardless of, say, your taste, but if you look at, say, like, Biggie, Tupac, Eminem, kind of those, like, going back towards the 90s, that kind of era, it seemed like it was a lot more meaningful. Like, music just seemed more meaningful back then, and you wrote from your experience, and whatever about music being worse or better nowadays, but it was definitely more experience based, and you tried to convey something from your life to give some sort of wisdom, even if that was like hose or something like that. But regardless, now it's like you don't need any talent in virtually anything that contributes to society in any kind of way to succeed on the internet. You can be a total fucking asshole, like Logan Paul, like, for example, like, he's an absolute dick, like, just an absolute dick. And he's making a fortune. Like, the dude has like a mansion, and you're just sitting there like, we're really encouraging negative aspects in children. And like what you said, like, kids are looking to be YouTube stars, which is crazy. Kids used to want to be doctors and rocket scientists and firemen and all these really valuable things. You know, like, that's something like very high and moral to aspire to be. And now it's like, yeah, no, I want to play Minecraft on YouTube for money. You know,
and the sample size is a part, right? Because I have had it, and I went back and forth on this exact point that you're making, is because one of my buddies brought up the point, right? So he was like, man, these kids nowadays are wild. And like, I feel like every generation says that about the youth, right? But then you look at like statistics, like crime rate is down, murders are down, all of these test scores are higher, right? And it got me thinking, like, is it just now we're able to see more of the the degenerates of this generation because it's public, it's all public now. And whereas before, to be really to be really looked at as an idiot in your circle, in your social circle, you had to really do something stupid, where now you can get 3,000-4,000 retweets for doing something stupid and you're still kind of known. You know what I mean? So that there's just sample size is a lot bigger because the stats are actually at, I mean, this is the highest life expectancy we've ever seen. This is I feel like this is the best era we've ever been in.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And Steven Pinker goes into that a lot. Say like that global poverty has been reduced by half in the last 30 years. And I don't...
Wow.
And that's domestic. This is global. I'm nearly talking global statistics. Global domestic violence is down, rape is down, starvation is down. Like disease by HIV and AIDS is down, disease by malaria is down. Like all these things that have been killing us for centuries and making our lives worse are all going down. But what happens now is that because we don't have to worry about starving, we don't have to worry about being homeless, we don't have to worry about being killed in the streets. We have to worry about literally people killing themselves. Like we have to make people want, or to let them find some meaning and responsibility, or at least let them just realize, what's good about society and what should you do to further it. Which, that's where I try to go, is that, like, look, I don't want to be always negative and always pointing out the problems, but that's because things are amazing right now. I agree. Like, this is the best point in history we've ever been in. The fact that this is our discussion is literally just saying, man, kids are assholes.
Yeah.
Like, that's our contention. That's like, we're not talking about shit. Like, that's such an easy problem to have. That doesn't mean like we shouldn't try to solve it.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And I agree 100%. It's just like I said, I've played both sides of this fence, right? And so like I'm kind of, it's like up in the air. It always can be better, man. But it's definitely, you have to stop and smell the roses, man. What about like the future, right? So when you look at like technology is your career, right? So this is my own little theory. I feel like it's inevitable that we'll get to a point where technology and human beings intersect, right? So there's some kind of like AI, or like we're like a computer chip in the brain. I know it's like super sci-fi, but am I super off base in kind of making that leap?
I think there's no point trying to predict the future with technology at all, because could we have predicted smartphones 15 years ago?
Tesla did.
Was Tesla even around 15 years ago?
No, that's the thing. So he made it's funny, I'm a huge science buff, so like he didn't necessarily say iPhones.
Oh, Nikola Tesla, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought you meant,
thought I was talking about Elon Musk?
I thought you were talking about the company. I was like, what?
No.
Yeah, okay.
I was talking about Nikola Tesla.
Yeah. But so he said that we would have smartphones, he
didn't say smartphones. He said his whole goal was
is that the voicemail thing? Is that that he knew we would be able to call each other and leave voicemails in some system?
He was trying to, and before Marconi's the one. I think he sent the first radio wave, like wireless information. He was the first one that did it, but Tesla had been trying for years. And then you read back on some of the things he said. He was like, "There'll be a time we can send videos, pictures, voice, all of this stuff." He said through the air. He was one of those cats that was so crazy. He was brilliant.
Well, I'm gonna take a rough leap and say that we're not those people. I'm gonna say that we're just like, and I know a lot about technology, let's say, just as a broad spectrum, and I still have no fucking clue. Like, and in terms of AI, has not developed nearly as quickly as we thought it would.
Really?
To be honest, like, I mean, we said in like 2005 that we would have AI that could like organize your schedule and like and give you life advice by like 2015 and stuff like that. We were saying those kind of things in 2005, and now, like, to be fair, have you seen Google Duplex?
I have not.
So Google Duplex is a new app that Google's releasing. It's an AI that essentially makes reservations for you. So it'll ring up a restaurant, pretend to use your voice, and then make a reservation for you. And it is ultra realistic. As in, like, you cannot tell that it's not a human. It's crazy. Now look, that's like a minute phone call where it's literally like, can I make a reservation for Wednesday 7 p.m? No. Okay, how about Friday at 3 p.m? Seat for 3. You know, like that's a simple conversation. But the fact that they can pull it off and totally simulate a human being is crazy. Because I was listening to it and everyone in the audience started clapping, and I was like, that's fucking terrifying. They can simulate simulate you from your phone. Like, how would you not think that's scary?
That's super
I mean,
weird.
we're advancing so fast where I literally want to like stop it and be like, all right, let's take a step back and be, think for a second, what are going to be the repercussions of what we do? Do we really want to? We're already losing our sense of humanity and meaning in the world anyway. So to go so far as to totally integrate with machines in like 50 years, we'll say.
So where is AI at right now? I mean, it's not super prevalent in my life, and I don't check the science blogs for.
I'm not a big AI buff like say Sam Harris or something like that either. I just I read the big headlines when I can. But from what I understand, people are really misusing AI nowadays. Like, AI is artificial intelligence, which means it's able to simulate a human being. Like, that's literally what AI is. It's not meant to be a system that like books that has a really fast hotel booking system, or like you'll see these companies nowadays and they'll say like we have a new AI system in place. Like, an AI is literally just able to simulate a human being. That's all it means. So that's what Google Duplex is, and that's the most advanced AI we have so far, in that it's able to almost perfectly simulate a human being. So that's, in my opinion, where we are. Like, we're at the stage where we can pretty much simulate human voice.
Yeah, I mean that shit in itself is kind of crazy. I did see this one. I don't know if it was in an article. I think it was an article where it was saying how, I think it was a Facebook thing where they had two bots that developed their own language. They were talking to each other. So
yeah,
like,
I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like they were saying they, the, row, whatever. But like they decoded it, and it's like, yo, they are communicating. So like, but they shut it down though, right?
Yeah, because they were like, we don't understand what's going on. What's the point?
I mean, that, or they were like, yo, this is scary shit. I mean, because if two opposite systems have figured out a way to communicate with each other,
yeah,
like that, to me, that's like, baby, that's the beginning steps of sentience.
Do you remember the Microsoft bot on Twitter?
I don't.
I can't remember, because so Microsoft put a bot on Twitter that would essentially it would consume the replies that people made to it and then generate intelligence based on that. So it would develop a personality. But what ended up happening is that the AI turned into like this Nazi. So it started being incredibly racist and sexist and misogynistic because it was like using the N-word and stuff. It was just being absolutely atrocious because 4chan.
Yeah.
They essentially started just throwing information at the bot, replies that was racist, misogynistic, homophobic, etc. Right. And then the bot can only use the information it's given. Like, that's all it does. It's not smart. Like, it literally just takes stuff and then makes estimates based on that information. So it really depends on what information you give it, and that's I thought it's fucking hilarious. I was like,
a racist robot.
Yeah. It was meant to be representative of the internet, so it was meant to just consume stuff on Twitter. And the fact that it turned into a racist and stuff, it's like, that's
it's perfect. I mean, that's the best of us, right?
That's exactly it.
I did see one though where, just like to your point, where the information it was given, they simulated a I don't know exactly where it's from, but they simulated they gave it the rules of the game, right? And it basically learned, so the computer learned how to they simulated like a person, like the dynamics of a person, and they had these bars that kept coming. Like, you would see these bars that kept coming, and like where the feet were, and basically it kept falling and getting up and falling, and it figured out basically how to hop over
I've seen that.
Yeah. So things like that. Not only that, if you look like chess computers that learn the game of chess, and they're far better than any human we have now. And they literally sit down and give it like 4 hours or something, and it completely whoops the ass of our most brilliant humans in chess. So shit like that makes me believe that I mean, like I said, technology is still in its infancy. So when you have computers that are able to assess the game, learn the game, and then learn it, learn the fact that it can learn is insane to me. So like, we're not the most logical beings, right? Computers, it's kind of written on logic, right? Algorithms based on logic. So like, what makes me think that if and when it gets, and this is sci-fi, but if and when it gets sentient, it's kind of like you've seen The Matrix, I assume, but when he said it was really an accurate and brilliant line when he said humans are most like a virus, like you spread and you destroy your ecosystem. Like, so
Well,
that's what freaks me out.
well, I think computers are logical, but they're not really rational, if that makes sense. Like in terms of being rational, like we can figure out what is kind of moral and ethical in that kind of stage, and we can really think and comprehend that kind of thing. Like, have you heard about the trolley problem? Where it's like, yeah. So if you say with that, like, if that was a computer, the computer doesn't feel guilt, doesn't feel anything.
So this is for people, because this is for people listening. So for people that don't know, the trolley problem is basically a philosophical question that says, all right, if you have a train that's going and it splits into two tracks, there's one person on one track and there's 5 people on another track. And it's gonna hit these people. Which one would you hit? I mean, the more rational person, I guess, would choose the one person because left's life is taken rather than 5. And go ahead. I'm sorry, this is for people that didn't know.
Yeah, sorry, I should have explained that. So that's kind of, most people wouldn't pull the switch because then they take responsibility for it. And where I'd kind of go with that is that humans, say, have like an intrinsic value that a computer wouldn't really value, that kind of way. Like there's a great book by Dostoevsky, like Crime and Punishment, where the main character, spoiler alert by the way,
Jordan Peterson loved the quote Dostoevsky.
Yeah, so he actually got me.
I've never read it, but maybe I should.
Yeah, he actually got me into the book, so I've been reading it. But like, what basically happens is the main character, just spoiler alert, prefacing, is one of the best books of all time. But what is the book name? Crime and Punishment.
Crime and Punishment, gotcha.
So like the basic premise is that, like, say, so this guy essentially he gets a loan off a lady, and then he hears people talking, and she's an awful person, and she ruins people's lives, and she her death would benefit society as a whole, let's put it that way. And he thinks about that, and he thinks like, well, like, why shouldn't I kill her? I mean, all I'm doing is benefiting society. So then he ends up killing her. He goes up and kills her, but for some reason he can't get it out of his head about the guilt. He just keeps feeling so guilty about it. He can't stop running it through his head, like, why he did it. And that's ultimately about finding God and meaning, all that kind of stuff. But a computer would kill that woman and feel zero guilt, because it's attractive from society. Why wouldn't you kill it? And that's kind of where humans differentiate. It's like, no, look, everyone has intrinsic value. We can't just kill people because they may or may not be detracting from society. So like, homeless people are detracting from society. Why shouldn't we just kill them? It gets into that kind of stuff where a computer will just look at people in society and then think like, are they of benefit? Are they taking away? And they would eliminate the people who are taking away. So in that kind of way, computers are logical but not rational, if you get me.
No, that makes perfect sense, and that is my fear. It's my fear that with AI is that when you look at things like that, like a homeless person, or how can you logically deduce value, right?
Yeah, you can't. Like, that's what we've done as humans. We've figured out that every human has meaning no matter what. That's literally what we figured out for the last 5,000 years, and that's one of the most mind-blowing realizations ever, and it's created the best societies on the planet that we'll probably ever have.
Right. No, and it's interesting. It's why, I mean, when you think about like space and is the life outside, it leads me to believe that and this is pure just spitballing here, but that if there is life outside this universe that can traverse back and forth easily, it's probably some kind of robotic life. Like that's how I think, because like us, I don't think we'll ever get to that point because of our emotions. Like, we're already talking about putting a space force up there. Like, what the fuck?
That's fucking hilarious, man. I love that.
Shit is crazy, man. But
I love that. That was just...
That's insane, man. But so to kind of circle back, man, how can people protect themselves from either the information getting out that they don't want, or whatever the case may be? Because a lot of the things that you found, a lot of the things that's out there, it's kind of scary, especially for people who don't really know, who are just not. I'm not a technological savant. I don't really understand this shit. So when I see terms and services, I'm like, whatever, let me get my tweets off, right? A lot of people don't know what's going on, man. So how can people best protect themselves from either big corporations or even the government?
Yeah, I just want to apologize for going into Dostoevsky from privacy. Don't know how that happened.
Hey, but, man, that's a beautiful conversation. That's how that.
So in terms of protecting privacy, I would kind of gauge like how much value certain websites have to offer you. So in terms of like, are you willing to compromise your privacy to use this website? So once you've kind of made that judgment, if you're really not, then you can either stop using the website or continue using it and then go into your privacy settings. So if you go onto Facebook, go into your settings, it's literally just there, like settings, privacy. Go in and turn off the stuff you don't want, leave the stuff you do want on. And you can do that for virtually all social media and most sites, including like Google and Twitter and all that kind of stuff. Then after you've done that, if you want to take another step, you can start using like a VPN. So that's just a virtual private network. I use NordVPN. All it is it just you download the program and you connect to it, and then it'll filter your web traffic so that it's encrypted and it doesn't come from your location. So that means that even if someone captures the information, they don't know what it says. Then it's also like, just, be careful about what you post online and that kind of stuff. Like, don't be a fucking idiot. Like, that's literally what I say to people, is just don't be an idiot. Like, if you don't want your boss to see something,
how hard it is for people to do that.
Man, I know, it's just, it's like I'm asking people just to fly to the moon. I know, but if you wouldn't want your boss to see it, then don't post it. That's it. Like, it's because if once you post something online, it's there forever. Like, I did a recent kind of, not investigation, but I'm writing an article about just that kind of stuff, information being leaked onto the internet, and I found something that, have you heard of the snappening?
The snappening, nah.
Yeah, you've heard of the fappening. So that's like when the celebrity iClouds got leaked and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, yeah.
But this is the snappening. So this is there was an app that essentially screenshotted Snapchats without letting the people know. And they stored those screenshot Snapchats on their servers, and that server got hacked. And all those Snapchats, it's about 200,000 Snapchats got leaked.
Just creepy shit, man.
Yeah,
just
that should exist.
creepy.
Oh, it's so easy. You can literally look up screenshot Snapchat.
I'm
and
straight.
You can screenshot. Oh yeah, fair.
Because I had a seen who's the actress that was on Divergence, that woman actress. Anyway, her nudes got leaked, and I looked. One of my boys sent them to me, and I felt bad about looking. And she came out with a statement, and she said that if you're looking at these pictures, it's a violation of me. And it's like, dog, I felt like shit after looking. And anytime anybody from here on out was like, yo, check these, they leak, and I'm like, nah, fuck no, I can't do it, man. I learned my lesson.
I totally agree, man. And what I was saying with the snapping is that there was like 14-year-olds on it.
Yeah, nah.
I went into the pictures and the videos, and I wanted to see what was on it, because that's literally what I do. I do that on the darknet too. I want to verify that it's kind of risky for me to do it, to be honest, because technically that's downloading child porn. But but I have logs and stuff showing that's for educational reasons, so I'm writing about it concurrently. So that, I think that's all right. But whatever. So like that's fucking terrifying. Like your 14-year-old daughter could have her nudes just on the internet. And what the worst thing about it is that people know that, and they won't put it on their sites. So you think that's not there. But I found it within 5 minutes. I found a download for it on like a torrent within 5 minutes. And I went in for a couple of minutes and looked at it, realized that it is real and that all this stuff is there. And I was like, okay, I don't want to look at that shit. It's violating, but I wanted to verify that it was real. But that can happen, and I have no idea how often that's happening. So like, you just be so careful what you post online, because like, if you look up the snapping, there's no sites that index it, but I still found it in 5 minutes. So it's still there, even though sites can't legally have it. It's still out there, and I can still find it easily. So it's, that's just scary. Like, that's, especially for your children, like, they should know by like, from the second you give them a tablet or a computer. Like, whatever about us, we're fucking adults. We have the the ability to make these decisions and then live through the consequences. But children don't. Like, they don't have, their brains aren't even fully developed. So, you know, like, if you give your kid a tablet, just fucking be so careful, especially in like the hypersexualized culture we have right now. They might think at like 11 that it's totally okay to send like a nude Snapchat,
Right.
you know, to some random dude or put on their story. Like, how are they meant to know if you don't tell them?
Yeah, nah. And I'm not even super like, because I'm not like super, I'm not conservative when it comes to like bodies and things like that. But what you're alluding to is things like people having access to this information. Because I'm not like super, I don't censor a lot of things for my kids, like if there's cussing in the movie, shit like that doesn't bother me. But like,
I would censor porn because
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, sorry, yeah, go on. Yeah, sorry for interrupting.
No, you're straight. Because just like you said, they don't have that choice. If it's just being fed to them, and I feel like you're kind of robbing them of an innocence that you take for granted because you're an adult and you can separate nudity from, you know what I mean? Like, nudity can be art, but at a kid, it's hard for them. They don't have those.
I was watching a TED Talk from this psychologist, and she was a pediatrician, and she said that she's been a pediatrician or a child psychologist for nigh on 35 years, and she says it used to be normal issues, you know, like bullying and all that kind of stuff, and like your parents divorcing and, you know, typical traumatic things for kids. 11 and 10-year-olds nowadays are like giving each other blowjobs. Like, that's, and she said that's a big fucking problem. Like, that shit's happening all the time.
10 and 11.
Yeah, like like that's so young. Like, they haven't even hit puberty yet. Well, maybe the girls have, but the guys haven't. And like, that she said that wasn't a problem like literally 15 years ago. It literally wasn't. Like, that didn't exist. Like, really rare cases where a child might be like sexually abused and then take that out on like one of their friends, something like that. But now it's super common nowadays. That shit. How old are your kids? Sorry, before I terrified you.
Nah, I mean, I'm already aware. But I got a 9-year-old, I got a 5-year-old, 4-year-old, and a 6-month-old.
So she attributes a lot of that to like porn, because if you give a kid like 22% of the internet is porn. So like, if you literally go on the internet, you'll find porn like that. Like, it's so easy. And if you see that kind of stuff, you start thinking it's okay, especially if you're a kid. Like, you've no clue. And we can't even have like an adult conversation about sex anymore. Like, even as adults, we don't even like talking about it. So like, what can kids do? Do you think a kid's gonna go say like, oh yeah, I saw this blonde girl sucking this guy's dick? It's like, no. Like, that's probably not gonna happen.
Nah, I mean, I agree, but when you look at like, so I can't necessarily blame porn. I'm thinking about it. I'll tell you why. I think the remedy is education, because when I was a kid growing up, we didn't have websites and shit. We had collect numbers that we used to call, or like magazines, right? Somehow or another, the 11, 12-year-old boy is gonna find it if he wants to see it. And I think it's about educating kids about responsible sexuality. The issue I think we're facing now is it's just happening earlier. Like, you see pictures from 14-year-olds when I was a 14-year-old, and 14-year-olds now looking 18,
oh, fucking
19.
crazy, man. Yeah,
insane. Like, makeup, and what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
So like, for some reason, the maturity level of the kids, and I haven't really ever looked into it, and I think I should, but the maturity level of the kids is exponentially higher, and it's going to keep getting higher. But I think they're just mimicking what they see in adult culture.
Exactly. So like, if you give like a 9-year-old access to Instagram, like, if you literally look at Instagram and you what you see mostly are, say, really thin, attractive women most of the time. Like, that's normally what you see, and that's like a standard that you're trying to strive for when you're like 11. Right. Which is it's bad enough that that's what people are trying to strive for when they're like 25, but when they're 11, when they're 11, like, that's crazy. And I agree with you. Like, when I walk around, even in Ireland, you know, which is like a fairly conservative country, like, when I walk around, I see 12-year-olds with full makeup on and like push-up bras and leggings on and stuff like that. And you're like, holy shit! When I was 12, I was like riding my bike. And, like, I didn't even. I was like excited about like kissing a girl, and now it's like you're a dick if you don't even get a blowjob from like a 12-year-old girl when you're 12, like, which is just fucking crazy. And like, I wouldn't necessarily lay the problem at the feet of porn per se, but it is that earlier access to it. So I mean, like if you look if you look at like a porn video nowadays and compare it to like the magazines that people were looking at when they were like 11, that is an unbelievable difference. Like that's just a crazy difference in like what's happening and what's going on. And also like with porn, it's a lot easier to get those dopamine hits, which is also going to get it very quickly, embed the ideas embedded into your brain.
So here's a philosophical question for you then. All right, so if you look at something like the concept of The Purge, I think the reason why the movie The Purge is so appealing to me. Have you seen the movie The Purge?
Yeah.
So for the people that don't, so for the he said I love it. So for the people that haven't seen it, I thought the very first Purge, I thought it was the dopest movie, but it had the weakest. It was kind of disappointing because the plot is so genius. So the plot is that everybody for one day, this is for people that haven't seen it or haven't heard of it, everybody for one day, all crime is legal. You can get out of your system. And so when you think about it from that aspect, right, porn is taking it's like a $9 billion industry or something like that. Porn has taken a huge leap from the back in the days when I used to steal it from my parents, or I used to look at the distorted porn on the TV. It has totally changed, but I think it's changed because people's wants have been normalized, right? And so that is healthy in my opinion. And I'm not talking about any child porn or anything like that, but I'm talking about like if your desires are normalized, if you have, because like there's people like now if you can dress up like a baby, and people dress up, these are adults, and they can dress up like babies or dress up like animals or whatever, they can go at it. You can find other people that are like that, whereas before you probably felt stigmatized and probably felt a little bit of social anxiety about having these desires, right? So it's like the saying, you get to get a little bit of that evil out, right? So I mean, what do you feel me in that aspect of the porn nowadays?
I get what you're saying, but you're talking about what's it called again? Fetishes. So like your fetishes are normally dictated from like some just generally like nurturing. So it's stuff that happens to you when you're a kid and a teenager. Really? I've read a study on it about it before. I can't quote it now. So look, we'll take it for granted that look, it's more influenced by.
Before you move on, I just want to understand what you're saying. You're saying that our sexual desires and fetishes are rooted in our childhood experiences?
Oh, totally. Yeah, totally. Like
really?
Completely. So what's happening really nowadays is that like if you go on and watch porn at like the age of 12. You know, when your nature is starting slightly to sexualize, you know, like where you're starting to move into that territory, that's dictating what your fetishes are going to be, or your normal sexual level. So like if you go on and the first thing you watch when you're 12 is, you know, like the crazy deep throat anal shit going on in porn nowadays, like blonde girl gets smashed by black dick, like and stuff like that.
That's I really, see what you search for, man.
Oh yeah, I love that shit, man. How'd you know? That's.
I feel you. It's an interesting dynamic. I actually want to have a call in. I want to have like a porn actress on my either actor or an actress on my podcast, because it's an interesting aspect. Like sexuality is something that's kind of suppressed. But it dominates our lives. It dominates everything we do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, it's bad in some sense to repress sexuality, or at least to make people feel bad about it. I will agree with you there. But there's also, I mean, nowadays we have, for the first time in the United States, so I'm going to try and make this sound as not racist as I possibly can, because I don't intend it in that way.
Usually something racist follows, but go ahead.
Perfect. But actually, no, I don't think this could be. Anyway, but for the first time among white people in the United States, there are more deaths than births across the entire United States. Like, this is the first time that's ever happened, just among white people in general. I don't think it's really happening in the Black or the Latino communities. But we'll say that because of socioeconomic reasons, that's probably why it's occurring. But what I think really is going on is that we're seeing a lack of kind of responsibility in some aspects, and people don't want to have children anymore and all that kind of stuff, because everything, because now we've demoralized sex to this stage where it's literally a transaction As in, like, it's just something that we get. Like, like, I'll bring you for drinks and I'll get sex in return. That's kind of like the Tinder culture nowadays. And speaking as like a 23-year-old, I can vouch for that's what's really going on at the moment. And it's very, very difficult for people to find meaningful relationships in general. So I feel like we've gone from like a very Christian, repressed sexual culture to totally in the opposite direction way too quickly, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree, but it's like, it's kind of what we hit on earlier. This is a great topic, man, but it's kind of what we hit on earlier. I'm unsure that it's a negative, right? And I understand that frame of mind when it comes from a lot of it's a conservative thought, right? But if you look at the divorce rates, and why they're so high, like I'm unsure where I stand on this personally, because monogamy is such a it's kind of like this facade of a utopia, in my opinion. And it's we do our best, and I do my best because I'm in a monogamous relationship right now, and we want it with everything in us. But the desire's still there. We just have to suppress it, right?
Well, I'd say that as like we have lots of desires. I mean, we have lots of things that we want to do on a daily basis, and we repress them because they benefit society. That's generally what we do. Like that's.
But that's what I'm saying. The benefits are subjective.
I don't think so. I mean, like if you look at.
How so?
So, for instance, like if you look at like a monogamous relationship, most people in relationships are happier than people who are single. Like that's a given. Like in terms of finding meaning in their life, like I need to like start research to document the studies I'm about to quote. But look, we could probably agree that people who are married and in relationships are generally happier than people who are single.
I don't think I can agree with that. And I'm saying that as a man in a relationship.
Yeah, me too.
I'm not saying I'm not happy. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if you look at like marriages, and a lot of this is anecdotal, of course, but if you look at like marriages 50, 60 years, you'll have your outliers where I feel like they're super lovebirds, but the majority of the time is they're forcing themselves to play a role because of societal pressures, right? And a lot of those societal pressures come from that religious background of you get married, you have kids, white picket fence, 2.5 kids, a dog. That's where it comes from. And people are now not having as many kids. I think it's because they're realizing that happiness is probably more so in yourself than another partner. I don't know how many people I've seen who are in relationships that shouldn't be because they don't even love themselves like they should.
Totally. Yeah, no, I agree with you on that sense. Like being in an unhappy relationship is much worse than being single. Yeah, I agree. But like normally a relationship frees you up to pursue that happiness without having to worry about getting a girlfriend.
One, absolutely.
Yeah, a healthy one, totally, which is normally dependent on the individuals. It has nothing to do with the idea of monogamy. It's normally down to the two people and their attitude towards it. But like all we have to do is look at the crime rate among single mother or single parent families, and then look at the crime rate of married ones. It's ridiculous. Like, let's say, so
I think that would be. Go ahead.
So, like, in terms of the biggest correlation with crime is single parenthood. So, like, that is the single biggest defining factor for people who commit crimes is single parenthood. Like, literally, like, that's just the case. Single parenthood and then poverty. But single parenthood is linked to poverty, so, you know, like, those go hand in hand. Yeah. So, like, if you look at that, like, that's why we made monogamy, literally, is just for children. Because having two parents in the household benefits society as a whole, and children get, you know, they get the financial circumstances, they get the emotional circumstances, they get the support they need. That's generally, like, a good case for monogamy in general.
Right. I agree. Monogamy is originally for... What's funny about it is it was originally set up for...
By the way, I was raised by a single mother, so I'm...
No.
Totally not.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you. No, what I'm saying is, like, originally monogamy set up for property distribution. Women were viewed as property, and I'll give you my daughter. You could have the ox or whatever the case may be, and it carried on, and that's why I say, if you look at it. So you said, so your premise was what? Because I don't want to misrepresent your position. Your premise was...
So my premise is that monogamy benefits society as a whole. Like in general, like the most optimal circumstances for a society to thrive is monogamy between people. It benefits the children. It frees up people. It lets people combine their finances, etc. Like it's better for society as a whole. Maybe not on an individual level, but we do need it as a foundation. In my opinion.
So this is where I would just make this small opposition, because I feel like, yes, it benefits society, right? But I'm unconvinced that it benefits individuals as a whole. Yes, 2-parent households, without a doubt, I think crime would be lower. Without a doubt, a lot of things would be better off. But individually, for those two people, it's the reason why divorce rates are so high. It's because monogamy is a tough thing to do. And I don't think it's a natural thing to do. So anything that is unnatural, I don't make a blanket statement like that, but a lot of unnatural behavior, you end up rebelling hard against.
Well, man, like most of our behavior is unnatural. I mean, we wear clothes. Like, why do we wear it? Like, that's unnatural. Like, what other animals on the planet wear clothes? You know, like we pretty much all of our behavior is unnatural.
But I'm talking about actually. That's not really a behavior. That's more like a behavior. Okay, sexual desires are evolutionarily programmed into us. Procreation is our goal as a species. Mm-hmm. So if my goal as a male is to propagate, then propagating with one human being, it's hard for me to do. I failed.
Yeah, no.
But it's hard to do because you're fighting hundreds of thousands of years of evolution.
I totally agree, but I'm not saying that's not hard, although it goes against our biology, but we worked out that going against our biology in that sense is much better. I mean, like, even the idea that we're not like screaming at each other, you know, like, or like, you know, we disagree, and we biologically, if you disagree with someone, you probably try and fucking kill each other. Like, that's normally how it works. But, you know, the societal pressure comes in, and then it's better for us to communicate on that kind of aspect and work through these things together. And that's generally what the kind of thing with monogamy is. Like, look, it's gonna be really fucking tough, but we can get through it, work through it together, and at least together we can combine like one full human being, like, who's sane, as opposed to two insane individuals drifting through life in that kind of way.
And I 100% agree with you, Red. So I'm on the same page with you there. And it's really kind of devil's advocate, because I'm obviously in a monogamous relationship, but when you say we'll get through it, like you say society is happier as a whole, if you're just doing things to do things, is that happiness, right? That's really the point. I don't
really measure things in happiness. I measure them in meaning. Kind of like, that's kind of the Jordan Peterson thing, you know, like, is that we measure things in responsibility and meaning, because happiness is fleeting. You know, like, happiness is a very fleeting thing. What we do actually want is responsibility and meaning. I mean, biologically, what the hell is happiness? You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't really...
Serotonin, dopamine.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, why don't we just take cocaine all the time? You know, that kind of way. So, like, it'll kill you eventually. But yeah, exactly. Like, too much happiness is... It's not good. What we really want is kind of meaning, responsibility, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not sure.
Isn't the meaning subjective?
The meaning subjective on like an individual level. Yes, right. Totally.
It's kind of his whole shtick is meaning is subjective, but he kind of tries to.
It's find your own meaning, you know, like, and that's the good thing about monogamy and marriage, is that if you find someone that you get along with, and then it literally frees you up to just find that meaning and constantly improve yourself, and you have someone to bounce off of with your deepest, darkest desires and all that kind of stuff, and they're not going to leave you, generally. Like, I'm not a one to force people to stay in bad marriages. I would prefer people are very careful about who they marry and then make sure that's going to be okay. Like, that's not one of the things he says, but one of the things he says mostly is that what you should look for in someone is mostly their ability to work through problems. Because if you're going to marry someone, that should be like the top I'm not married, so I'm probably talking shit, but that should be like one of the top things, that you have the ability to communicate one another and work through problems.
No, I mean, shit, that's the number one attribute you look for in employees. Yeah,
totally, man. Like, that's the number one thing you want in people in general. Like, that's just what you want.
I disagree with a lot of what Jordan Peterson says, but one thing he said that I would agree with that. But one thing he said that absolutely was applicable to my life was, and I use it to this day, and I spread this message: every single thing matters. And what I mean by that, and what he means by that is, he said something, and I'm gonna butcher it, but I'm gonna paraphrase it here. And he was talking about like relationships. Everything matters, from the drapes that you guys pick, to the dresser that you pick, to the carpet, to the bed arrangement, where the dresser is. All of this shit matters, because what happens is, all relationships is a compromise. And what he's saying is, if I don't like where the dresser is, I don't like the color of the drapes, I don't like this, I don't like that, and I'm just doing it because you want it. After a while, what happens is everything inside of your home becomes a landmine. Every single thing becomes a landmine. So like that pisses me off. Like that pisses me off. And over the years, times, it just blows up. All these small things become so huge that it's no longer, you can no longer reconcile the actual issues where you're upset with somebody, because it's just an overwhelming array of things that you disagree about. So it's a really beautiful, and especially like, that's why I follow a lot of people I disagree with, a lot of people I agree with, because there are things that I pick up from people like that, where I necessarily don't agree with his ideologies or his worldviews, but shit makes sense to me. It makes sense to me, right? And I draw from all points of life and all the spectrum of political ideologies. But dog, this has been a great conversation. I didn't know you were talking really about porn and shit.
Yeah, shit, sorry, man. I always do that. I just start going like,
let's talk about
this. Let's talk about porn.
No, it was a really good conversation. It was really why I started my podcast, was to talk with people who are from totally different walk of life and just kind of converse on things and see where the conversation takes us. And I've learned a lot from this conversation already, man. You challenge my thoughts, and that's what I'm all about, man. So I love it. So I appreciate you taking the time out. It's been a long time coming. I know I've been dodging you for about a month, man. Apologize, man. Shit happens,
I was
man.
waiting at like 3:45. I was like, this dude's gonna bail. Like, I know it.
Yeah, nah. I hate to having that reputation, man, but
nah, dude, you're busy. It's fine.
Shit just came up day after day. But man, I appreciate you taking the time out, man. If anybody wants to find you or follow you, or if there's anything when you plug, go ahead, man.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at I am Dylan Curran. My YouTube channel is just Dylan Curran. And then you can also work with a company called Presearch. They're fantastic, so just check out presearch.org. And yeah, that's everything.
You got a book you're working on, you said?
Yeah, that's not going to be out for like a year. But yeah, look, people can follow me for updates on that if they want.
For sure, come back on and we'll plug it, and hopefully I'm big as shit by then too. So
hell yeah, man. Hopefully we're both big as shit.
Yeah, man, for sure, man. Yeah, so all our subscribers out there, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, because that shit matters for some reason. We appreciate you coming on, man. Much love, and keep doing what you're doing, man. What you are doing is important, man, for people in the society.
Cheers, dude. Thanks for having me.
Much love.
Take care.